An ordinary law office in the fall of 1967 was experiencing paranormal occurrences that would change things for them forever. They were used to getting the occasional phone call to the office every now and then, the power going out sometimes, and casually being around their fellow coworkers. But even all of those seemingly normal things changed one day, and their world was completely flipped inside out. They started experiencing an unusual amount of phone calls and some weird electrical glitches going throughout the office, which wouldn't usually ring any alarms until it started happening every day, every hour, even every minute. As part of those electrical glitches, a lot of the lights hanging from the ceiling that kept the place lit up throughout the day, they started going out repeatedly, even after the team had changed them out for brand new light bulbs. Even fuses in other machinery like the printers in the office space were randomly burning out. One day, when it all became a little too much and a little too bizarre, they noticed, well, all four of the office phones started ringing at the same time altogether. And it was almost like somebody was calling each phone to play some weird prank on them, but when they picked up the phones, nobody was on the other end, just static. After that day, the office manager began reaching out to electricians, parapsychologists, even scientists, and the local media to come over to the office and try and uncover any bizarre faulties that they had been experiencing the past few days. But they quickly found a new problem. All of the extra people roaming around the office as to help try and uncover what was going on, that almost seemed to make it worse. The electrical surges now were recorded at an all-time high from those electricians. And the electrical surges, it was almost like a current that began shocking and pushing things around. Inanimate objects were beginning to move by themselves. They even witnessed an ink cartridge that the office assistant was going to replace into the printer that had been acting up. That ink cartridge was on its own, nowhere near a place where it could fall, but that's what happened, and it spilled all over the floor when nobody was even around it. The groups of all of these people, while they were trying to study the currents within the hallways of the office, well, all simultaneously heard loud banging against the walls. They described it as almost like as if somebody was hitting the walls aggressively in anger, but none of them were doing it, and they really couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from. That is when they all saw it, and they went speechless. They saw picture frames along the hallway walls. They started to rotate while they were still hung, almost like as if someone invisible that they couldn't see was grabbing each picture frame and rotating them, spinning 360-degree angles so fast that the frames started falling off of the wall, shattering all over the office floor. Sigmund Adam was in the middle of all of this, in another room talking to the local telephone company that was there, trying to work alongside him testing the phone lines, but they couldn't find any explanation for the disturbances, or especially why they told him that the phones were ringing by themselves 40 to 50 times in a row. Now, all of this is unusual, but what's even more unusual is that this is 1967, and the phones back then weren't an iPhone that you could tap the screen of, or even an old house phone with buttons that you could press. These were the phones that had a cord that attached to a wall with a rotary ring where you had to ring it all the way to a certain number in order to dial anybody's phone number. That's impossible. Nobody could ever dial any sort of speed like that. You'd have to dial one number at a time. It didn't make any sense to them. As things kept escalating, they couldn't figure it out, and they were freaked out at this point. So they started spreading the word around. We can't figure out what's going on in this office, and it's not just some regular power surge. We need help. And news eventually got around locally to a parapsychologist named Hans Bender, who also studied paranormal and poltergeists. Well, Hans ended up deciding to bring a team of his own investigators that specialize in this sort of thing of bizarre occurrences. They brought some recording equipment to try and see if they could calculate some data of when the disturbances were even taking place. Maybe they could find some sort of connection. Almost immediately, they did end up recording a connection that they found was directly associated with when the phone calls would take place, the electrical bursts of the light bulbs around the ceiling, and even the pictures that were flying off the walls. One specific thing that they did notice is that all of these disturbances were only happening during office hours, almost like it was a pattern that connected directly to what was in the building, and that pattern went directly to the office assistant, an employee, a 19-year-old named Anne Marie. On one of the last days that Hans and his team of investigators were there, along with the other groups of people that they had brought in to help uncover this, they all watched as Anne-Marie went throughout one of the hallways to gather some more supplies for the office space. But as she made her way through the hallway, that's when it all started to make sense. They saw that behind her, the light fixtures started to move and the pictures began to rotate. And that's when they connected that she was carrying some type of energy, because as she began to get more of a distance between herself and the inanimate objects, well, the energy was weakening the further away she got from them. Immediately, Hans thought, this is what it is. Anne-Marie might be carrying some repressed emotions that are really bothering her. As he knew, this can trigger psychokinetic energy, which is a trademark of poltergeist cases that he had been on in the past. Anne-Marie might be the very reason why there are electrical surges or the phones ringing all day and night while she was there. And she had no idea that she had this psychokinetic ability to her, or that she was directly associated with a poltergeist. One of the most terrifying incidents that they all saw as they were about to leave is when they witnessed a large filing cabinet that was stationed around an area of one of the offices, when it just started to shift and it moved across the space all by itself while they were just there watching it in total shock. And they couldn't have moved on its own unless there was some kind of energy connection. This was a linoleum floor. It's very, very thin type of flooring and would rip very easily with a heavy object moving over it without someone strong lifting it up. But it was almost like an invisible force was moving it with no struggle at all. Later, after Hans and his team finally left the establishment, he later figured out that Anne-Marie was indeed in a lot of emotional distress, and she had a lot of pent-up emotion from an engagement that had been called off, and she wasn't doing well emotionally. The entire scenario eventually took a complete turn when Anne-Marie eventually, in January of 1968, left that job. And as she left, seemingly all of the disturbances that they had been experiencing in the office stopped, almost like she took all of that energy out with her. If you'd like to see more videos just like this one, please subscribe to this channel if you stayed until the end, and share this video with someone who you know also likes the scary, mysterious, and creepy side of the internet.